The galaxy had long been ruled not by wisdom or compassion, but by fear. At its center sat the galactic sovereign, a being so ancient his name had faded, replaced only by titles: Emperor, the core, voice of order, living law. His reign was absolute, his power unquestioned, his cruelty legendary. In every corner of the known systems, silence followed his arrival. Subjugated species cowered. Resistance burned out generations ago, and treaties signed in desperation lined the vaults of the core council. Yet amid this enforced harmony, one species had emerged that refused to bow. Humans, a death world species born from pressure, fire, and extinction. They had arrived late to galactic stage, uninvited and immediately distrusted. Alien observers described them as erratic, volatile, immune to deterrence. They built quickly, adapted faster, and feared almost nothing. But even they had signed the Treaty of Kesh, not out of deference to the sovereign, but for the sake of peace. Humanity did not fear war. They feared what war would make them again. And so they built their embassies, stationed their envoys, and offered their cooperation with cautious restraint. The Lumerus, 9 outposts, was one such token of cooperation. Nestled within the neutral zones, it housed over 40 species, a monument to diplomacy. Trade, education, and research thrived. Their humans were neighbors, not anomalies. Children of all species played in oxygen gardens and crystal towers. Among them was Mira, a 7-year-old human girl, known not for her lineage but her laugh. She was bright, unnervingly observant, and endlessly curious. Many who met her forgot she was a deathworlder at all. She painted the scales of a Zavaria ambassador's tale in exchange for stories. She practiced dialect for Drenari monks. She once convinced an Alari ice priest to teach her a forbidden melody, just to see if it sounded like stars. Her mother was listed in the records simply as civilian guardian. Her father was unlisted. Mira never spoke of them. Few asked. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she had become the heart of that station, a living symbol of everything the treaty had tried to achieve. Until the king came. No warning preceded his arrival. The core shuttle pierced restricted space, transmitted sovereign override codes, and landed on Lumerus. 9 like a blade dropped from orbit. His guard detail was minimal. He feared nothing. He had come to inspect, he said, to remind the species that peace was not equality, and the treaty did not imply tolerance. His presence drained color from every hallway. Dignitaries recited memorized greetings. Station officials bent knees. The humans said nothing, but their eyes were harder than iron. He walked the halls like a god touring a shrine built in his honor. He looked at the alien children as one examines pests in their kitchen. He sneered at humans who dared stand tall. His words were not cruel, they were cold. His guards laughed too easily. His gaze lingered too long. He saw a mirror near the hydroponics dome, alone, painting shapes on the glass wall. She turned, smiled, and asked if he was lost. She was not afraid. That irritated him. When he asked who she was, she said she was Mira, daughter of stars, and asked if he'd like to see her drawing of a storm whale. That answer enraged him. He struck her. The moment passed too quickly for alarms. No witnesses interfered. They watched, frozen between law and survival. He struck her again. Bones broke. She collapsed. He declared her punishment complete. Unfit behavior, he said. Unlawful existence. He walked away. His guards followed. One kicked her small body aside as if clearing trash from a corridor. She died 5 minutes later. Alone. Official reports were written. They listed unfortunate accident. Classified cause. Restricted footage. Human personnel were told to accept it as tragedy and move forward for the good of peace. No names were attached. No charges filed. No apologies made. Her body was delivered in a sealed diplomatic casket to a black site on Titan's shadow belt. No eulogy. No ceremony. A single note accompanied the shipment. Per request, remains returned. Incident closed. The silence afterward was not absence. It was containment. The humans did not rage. They did not protest. They observed. An emergency vote was called among Terran High Command. Civilian channels were rerouted. Military AI cores were reinitialized in deep cycle wake-up sequences. Activation codes passed between the stars like whispers through ghosts. Hidden stations that hadn't lit up in decades began calculating trajectories. Earth remained silent. The human station on Lumerus, 9 left within hours. 1 remained. She stood on the landing pad after the others had gone. Her rank was never spoken aloud. She wore no medals. Her skin was marked with faded burns and interlocking tattoos no alien language could translate. Her name had been purged from databases during the Scorch protocols. She was not listed in human military logs. Only remembered, she watched the stars. Then she stepped onto the shuttle and disappeared into jump space. Her name was Vira Solenne. She had commanded the Black Spiral Fleet in the War of Cinders. She was the architect of the Storm Vault collapse that ended the Karev uprising. Her reputation had forced an entire race to sterilize their weapons rather than provoke her return. She had retired voluntarily. The galaxy had hoped she would stay gone. She did not scream when she received the report. She did not demand justice. She simply reviewed the footage, illegally decrypted, corrupted frames reconstructed via forensic AI. She watched her daughter smile. She watched the king raise his hand. She watched Mira bleed. Then she closed the file and requested full access to legacy command assets. Denied. She requested again. Denied. She sent a final request. By authority of Black Flag Protocol Delta 8, I am invoking sovereign override. This is not war. This is correction. No reply came. 3 hours later, 29 black sites reactivated simultaneously. For old war machines, outlawed by treaty, surfaced in the ice oceans of Europa. An autonomous dreadnought, missing since the last extermination war, repositioned itself into Sol orbit. The ghost code was broadcast on silent frequencies. All who knew its meaning understood. Vira had awakened. In the days that followed, strange things happened. The king's allies found their private comms intercepted by unknown signals. Core data archives were erased and overwritten with Terran genetic blueprints. Several of the king's outer rim supply chains collapsed as their reactors failed under conditions engineers described as impossibly precise sabotage. A trade prince in the Era system publicly declared neutrality, then vanished. His fortress was found melted into the bedrock. His guards carbonized mid-scream. The king was informed. He laughed. "Let them whimper," he said. "Let them burn their own gardens, if it pleases them." He ordered an increase in patrols. He authorized preemptive scans of Terran convoys. He made jokes about Mira during a council session. One of his advisors resigned that night. Then another. Then 3 more. One left a note. "You don't understand what you've done. You killed something pure. And worse, you did it in front of her." The king's courtiers had grown used to dominance. Their reports always arrived wrapped in triumph. Border skirmishes crushed, rebellions buried, economies bent into compliance. But since the incident on Lumerus 9, their updates were different, vaguer, slower, incomplete. Words like anomaly incident and pending confirmation littered every communique. The Empire's efficient machinery, once capable of charting asteroid rotations across parsecs, now struggled to explain how entire colonies vanished without trace. The Terran Republic made no moves the sensors could track. Their fleets remained stationed, their diplomats absent. No declarations, no embargoes. But in the shadows of galactic infrastructure, they were everywhere. Listening posts began receiving indecipherable interference. Navigational satellites malfunctioned in key trade corridors. Long-range jump relays were misaligned by fractions of degrees, just enough to cause accidents, enough to instill doubt. It was not invasion. It was erosion. Within Terran black sites, Vira Solenne coordinated without fanfare. She reactivated the Revel Doctrine, a strategic framework used only once before, during the Extinction War on Ether Prime. It operated on a singular principle: remove the Empire's capability before it ever reaches for retaliation. She didn't need fleets. She needed precision. And she had it. Her first target was the trade nexus of Zirenhold, not its physical form, but its digital backbone. Over 200 alien species relied on it for logistical routing. One core AI controlled it all. It vanished. No explosions. No fire. It simply stopped responding, replaced with a recursive loop of Myra's voice counting 1 to 20. Then it reset. The entire station paralyzed within an hour. From Zirenhold Attraction Gate to Veer's Fold, the infrastructure of the King's realm buckled without a shot fired. Every attack was untraceable. Damage too clean. Recovery impossible. Vira wasn't fighting battles. She was deleting leverage. An intercepted message between Corps admirals read, "We are bleeding, and we cannot find a blade." While the King blamed sabotage, uprisings ignited in fringe sectors. Species that had remained neutral began hedging toward Earth. The Trillari, once vassals of the throne world, broke protocol and opened unofficial talks with Terran intermediaries. Their reason: your silence is more terrifying than his fleets. Alien news networks whispered of Widow Protocol. First dismissed as rumor, the term gained clarity when a group of mercenaries stormed a research station and found it abandoned, its personnel erased from every known registry. In the command room, etched in plasma-burned steel, were the words, "She is awake." The King dispatched kill teams to track Vira. None returned. He issued planetary arrest warrants for every officer with Terran ties. The arrests triggered coordinated blackouts. In one instance, a core military base tried detaining a human communications officer. Within 60 seconds, their command AI self-destructed, and every targeting drone fired on the base itself. Survivors reported seeing a woman in dark armor, standing atop the rubble before vanishing. He issued denials, claimed the incidents were fabricated, labeled Earth a destabilizing force. But the damage continued. His fuel convoys ceased arriving. His assassination squads never made it past orbit. His private residences were compromised. Every time he moved, a data stick appeared in his quarters containing an image of Mira, always smiling. By then, he no longer joked in council. His orders grew harsher. Executions increased. Loyalists grew paranoid. It was no longer Earth they feared. It was her. Within Terran territory, civilians began evacuation drills that were never explained. Families left core colonies for deep sheltered stations. Civilian space traffic slowed. Then it stopped. Mining fleets halted production. Artificial suns in the inner Sol system dimmed. One by one, the lights of humanity's known assets disappeared. They were not retreating. They were positioning. Inside the forgotten vaults of Karen's Shadow Zone, Vira launched Project Widow's Flame. Not a weapon, not a fleet. A protocol. Every Terran AI, ship, and covert team activated under a new directive. Decentralized execution. Orders would no longer come from her. They would emerge from sublayer networks, impossible to trace. Her command was now embedded in everything humanity owned. She had become a system, not a person. On the planet Vexel Core, a ceremonial parade for the King turned to massacre when the climate control grid overloaded, flash freezing half the city. Emergency shields failed. Power reserves drained moments before restoration could begin. Later, it was discovered that 10 years prior, a Terran engineering student had helped design the city's power matrix. The pattern was repeating. Earth wasn't deploying. Earth had already been there. The King attempted to counterstrike. His battle fleets assembled near Sector Callus. But his commanders found themselves without coordination. Command relays jammed. Navigation data falsified. Ships collided mid-jump. Then came the silence. Entire fleets simply never arrived. Those that returned were ghosted, AI cores wiped, crews speaking gibberish or not at all. One dreadnought drifted into a civilian orbit, its crew smiling, muttering she forgave us, until starvation took them. The Sovereign authorized full retaliation. He ordered planetary bombardment on Terran border worlds. No coordinates were accurate. Every missile missed. Ground invasions landed on barren landscapes already stripped of life. Entire worlds appeared dead. But they were not dead. They had become traps. On Juraxis, a battalion set up command posts and deployed defensive towers. Within 72 hours, their water turned acidic, their drones self-targeted, and the sky began raining heated alloy fragments from orbital wreckage they hadn't noticed. One survivor crawled into a relay beacon, burned and blind, muttering, "She erased gravity." The Galactic Council panicked. Emergency sessions were held. Arguments spiraled. Some pleaded for negotiation. Others demanded total war. Earth's envoy seat remained empty. When the council chair tried sending a message, the transmission rerouted. Instead of reply, every screen across the chamber flickered. Myra's face, a heartbeat monitor, a sharp flat line, then a date and a single word, judgment. The date was 9 days away. The king demanded a full defensive lockdown. He restructured his homeworld's orbit, activated deep space kinetic barriers, and tripled the guard of his inner citadel. He spoke less in public. When he did, his voice shook. His people saw it. His enemies heard it. They knew. They weren't being challenged. They were being prepared for. Across the stars, species aligned with the core began rescinding their alliances, not out of rebellion, out of survival. They saw which direction the wind had turned. Some reached out to Earth. None were answered. Terran's silence had become doctrine. Vira had made absence into policy. But where she struck, nothing was left untouched. In one of the Sovereign's private archives, buried in a data vault, lay a restricted file from the Ethereal War. It described the Black Spiral Fleet's dissolution. The report was brief. She convinced us not to surrender. She convinced us not to win. She convinced us to vanish. Below the report, 3 words: never provoke her. The galaxy was not silent in the aftermath. It was stunned. Systems continued orbiting. Civilizations functioned. Markets reactivated. But something deeper shifted. An awareness. A fracture in assumption. The king was gone. Not just dead, but erased from collective memory, as if the stars themselves had decided he no longer belonged to time. There were no celebrations. No declarations of victory. Because no one could define what had occurred. His empire collapsed inward like a burned-out star, leaving behind structures with no gravity to hold them together. Species who once followed him scrambled for new identities. Court governors resigned in masses. Statues crumbled from within. Maps redrew themselves without debate. There was no successor. No war. Just a moment before and a moment after. And in the center of that collapse, humanity stood unmoved. They did not claim dominion. They did not demand tribute. No fleets advanced. No new laws issued. Their systems remained closed. Their ambassadors silent. But every intelligent species now viewed Terrans not as dangerous or strange. They viewed them as a force, impersonal, inescapable, and deeply unwilling to negotiate where it mattered. Those who understood began rewriting their military doctrines. Strategic academies added new modules focused not on conventional tactics, but on human psychology. The Karsathi developed a new defensive stance called the Widow's Buffer, based entirely on rumors of Vira's actions. The Ilari outlawed the conscription of children in any conflict, fearing what it might provoke in other species. The Verene Empire decommissioned half its fleet and sent a unilateral non-aggression pact to Earth, accompanied by an offering of preserved memory crystals inscribed with an apology to the girl who mattered. Earth never responded. Within Terran command, Vira did not speak to the High Assembly. She did not submit reports. She simply returned to her station beneath Karen's crust and ordered a system freeze. Her neural interface disconnected from all active feeds. Her war mind shut down. The only record she left behind was a single line of text in her native dialect. Equilibrium achieved. She did not return to public life. She did not attend any commemorations. She was never seen again. But in human space, her absence carried weight equal to presence. When Terran children asked about Mira, they were taught not about vengeance but about weight. How a single life changes mass, orbit, and outcome. In some colonies, a new tradition formed. On the anniversary of Myra's death, people would remain silent for 7 minutes, then release a single painted orb into space. Each orb was designed by a child. Each one was unique. They were not tracked. They were not retrieved. They simply drifted. In distant sectors, species whispered new rules. Do not provoke humans. Do not threaten their young. Do not confuse silence with submission. Not because humans were superior in strength, many species were. Not because they had the largest fleets. Several others held that title. but because they possessed something different, something the galaxy struggled to quantify. They remembered. Other species grieved death. Humans archived it, indexed it, studied it, carried it, and when the universe wounded them deeply enough, they didn't heal. They rebuilt the battlefield. Vira's campaign had been flawless not because of firepower, but because she struck not where the Empire was strongest, but where it was sure of its own immortality. She had turned their confidence into her entry point. She hadn't needed armies because she had been patient. She didn't require war declarations because grief had no bureaucracy. From her first action to the king's final breath, there were no missteps, no reversals. Every move had been calibrated decades in advance. The moment Mira was born, someone had recorded her DNA in a legacy core reserved for war assets next to kin. That alone had unlocked ancient black site codes once deemed myth. The triggers had not been emotional. They were procedural. Vira hadn't just avenged her daughter. She had executed a response mechanism built into the bones of Terran military doctrine. Protect the future or remove those who threaten it. Among the core remnants, factions began worshipping Myra's name as a warning. Fringe sects carved her likeness into relics, not idols, markers. She had become a variable in political calculus. New equations included her weight. Diplomatic models adjusted for the risk of her echo. In simulation chambers, AI war minds asked one question before greenlighting any offensive plan. What they remember? In the Trilari archives, a historian published a document titled the day memory became strategy. It detailed how humanity had leveraged the emotional architecture of its civilization to wage war without declaration, mass, or remorse. The final chapter simply listed every name erased from history by Vira's retaliation. The list was long. The last line read, "One name remained. That was all she needed." Within Terran space, no one sought credit. No monuments for Vira. No medals. No processions. It wasn't humility. It was respect. She had become untouchable, not sanctified, but singular. Her presence lived in the protocols now, etched into defense grids, burned into AI subroutines, encoded in fallback layers of planetary evacuation systems. When the next galactic power attempted aggressive posturing against Earth, their transmission was intercepted. Not jammed, not blocked, intercepted and returned with exact cadence, tone, and timestamp. A mirror, not a reply, but an acknowledgement of reception. They never tried again. In the sector once ruled by the king, planetary governors began implementing civilian child protection policies modeled after Terran guidelines. It wasn't altruism, it was defense. When asked why, one governor stated, "If they believe we harmed even one more, we won't have to fear conquest. We'll face erasure." The galactic economy, once fueled by imperial centrality, fragmented. But instead of collapse, it adapted. Local autonomy flourished. Regions developed stronger interspecies ties. Without the king's grip, diplomacy no longer required appeasement. It demanded listening. And in that silence, Myra's memory lingered. She had not spoken in councils. She had never led troops. She had drawn with paint, not plasma. Yet she had done what fleets and ideologies could not. She had shifted the galactic center of gravity, not by force, by mattering to one person, enough to trigger a reckoning that permanently redefined deterrence. In time, Vira's name faded from common use, not because she was forgotten, but because she became foundational. Like oxygen, like inertia, strategy simulators carried her assumptions. Warfare projections began with her equations. Her model became the baseline for nonlinear retaliation. She didn't need to be remembered. She was embedded. Alien children, once raised on myths of human unpredictability, were now taught something new, that humans were consistent in only one domain. Consequence. If hurt, they might forgive. If insulted, they might ignore. But if you forced them to bury someone they loved, they would calculate your existence into a decimal and delete it. This understanding did not make humans feared in the old sense. It made them respected in the irreversible sense. Like gravity, like time, something you don't challenge, something you work with, something you avoid awakening unless absolutely necessary.